is Aryel Sanat. Uh, I met him in St. Petersburg many years ago, and when I heard him speak, I realized he is one of the finest representatives of not only the Theosophical Society, but all forms of esoteric wisdom. He is an expert on Madame Blavatsky, an expert on Krishnamurti, David Bohm. He's absolutely incredible. And he has written this book, Dawn of a New Era, Krishnamurti and the Wisdom Explosion in the American Age. And he's a prolific author. He has several other books coming out very soon. And we're very fortunate to have him here with us. Let's give him a big hand. So I'm going to start out. It's Ariel and Scott in conversation. We're each going to give a spiel, and then we will converse at that point. We'll see how this goes. We'll just make it up as it goes. Okay. I wanted to say something. Make it up. So, yeah, and that was a really tremendous presentation by Tracy there. Thank you. And that's and that's an example of putting the wisdom, including science, into language that people can understand, which was a mark of Dr. Douglas M. Baker, and Tracy was following that up. And Jeff, Marcus, Dieter, and Tracy, all of them have referenced this idea that we live in a larger being, and it's self-similar, top to bottom, and that being lives in a larger being, etc. It's holographic. I also want to mention Roger Penrose with his conformal cyclic cosmology, that there's been a series of big bangs, not just a big bang, but he calls it conformal cyclic cosmology. He avoids using the idea that these are universes. He calls them eons, but they're really very, very similar to what we have in the esoteric traditions. I also wanted to mention with my good friend Muhammad El-Nashi, he had figured out that what these mini black holes are, they're golden mean spirals, as mini black holes may well be the fundamental building blocks of nature, the quantum foam that was referred to early on. Okay, so let's begin. Okay, just a couple reminders. You recall that the essence of my path was really exemplified in this Mahatma letter, number 90 in chronological order. We recognize but one law in the universe, the law of harmony, of perfect equilibrium. And you recall in my studies with David Bohm, the big thing, the essential features of quantum interconnectedness are that the whole universe is in some way enfolded in everything, and that each thing is enfolded in the whole. And you recall that we found the golden balance that is at the core of all forms of existence, the entire universe, every level, where the source or the one becomes the geometric, arithmetic, and harmonic mean of the greater and the lesser, the two golden ratios, and their squares. And remember, as above, so below, and as below, so above. We need that intermediate position. Something I didn't say we need to understand is there's the macrocosm, the microcosm. What we're doing here involves the mesocosm. That's the same thing with the Gothic cathedrals, all the different teachings, the Hermetic wisdom, Buddhist philosophy, all of that is a teaching that links us, bonds us as a mesocosm to the macrocosm. And what I was trying to teach the other day or yesterday, we talked about implicate order and explicate order, but here's the deal. For David Bohm, the super implicate order turns out to be the one and indefinite dyad, that they're pre-number ontological principles. And then the implicate order is the golden mean number system and the root ratios, root 2, root 3, and root 5. That gets expressed in what Bohm would call the explicate order, the outer world, in the flora, the fauna, the cosmos via Fibonacci and Lucas numbers. For example, in phyllotaxis, leaf arrangement, in the growth in orbits, spins, turbulence, phase shifts, periodic table of elements, and the ideal divergence angle or the genetic angle of 137.5 degrees. That's just a little bit of a review for you. So I'm going to point out three possible things here. There's a list that Aryel and I can speak about. The perennials, the Mahatmas, appear to be behind the formation and the work of the Theosophical Society, Alice Bailey's Arcane School and Writings, Olga Frobisher-Kapteyn's International Center of Spiritual Research, and subsequently Eranos, and Dr. Douglas Baker's Little Elephant Ashram work, including his magnum opus, the Esoteric Astrology Dictionary. The role of KH, Kuthumi Lal Singh, appears to have been central to much of this, and now the influence of Krishnamurti and his acknowledged interaction with KH and Maitreya, the future Buddha, Bodhisattva, or Christ. Since it's Sunday, I'm going to bring this out. The developments of the humanities, comparative religion and mythology, the transpersonal psychologies, and the explosion in the sciences of quantum mechanics and relativity theory, as well as El-Nashi's penetration into the underlying fabric of nature, dark matter and dark energy, and his deduction, his ability to deduce the masses of all the fundamental particles, the quarks, and the coupling constants of the Standard Model. The disembodied entity their group communicated with in those years, we're talking about Olga Frobisher-Kapteyn now, they recognized in Master Kuthumi. Kutumi's been behind much of what's going on. We saw Robert Assagioli, who was a teacher of Dr. Baker, the neurologist from Rome. Robert Assagioli, founder of psychosynthesis and a follower of the Tibetan, also wrote on esoteric astrology for the Arcane School under the pen name of Considerator. Olga Frobisher-Kapteyn, I mentioned, we really didn't look at them. She did these incredible geometric, beautiful drawings, abstract drawings. Here you see in the portal of initiation, the 7 steps that lead to the initiatory temple in the nature of the cosmos. And we have the chalice of the heart. And when you break that down into 7 levels, you see where the vertical, it divides it right in the top of the grail itself. And furthermore, you see how these points are really of a pentagon, which is nature's most basic way of displaying the golden ratio. So I want to introduce a little bit here about the esoteric astrology and sacred geometry prophecy. So in Alice Bailey's work, in the Treatise on Cosmic Fire, the most important work that Bailey did, Douglas Baker used to say, if you have the secret doctrine in one hand, cosmic fire in the other hand, you have probably 40% of the wisdom of the world. She says, well, actually, it's the Tibetan through his amanuensis, Alice Bailey. When therefore the esoteric side of astrology and of mystical esoteric geometry has been studied, and the alliance has been made between these two sciences, a flood of light will be thrown upon this matter of the intelligent principle. When the inner workings of the law of cause and effect is better comprehended, then and only then will the sons of men be able to study with profit the place of manas in the evolutionary scheme. Manas is the intelligent purpose of some being working out in active objectivity. The whole mystery of this principle is hidden in 2 fundamentals. That's where the sacred geometry comes in. The mystery of the resolution of the 6-pointed star into the 5-pointed star, and the mystery of the lords of karma, who are in themselves the sole recipients of the mind purposes of the cosmic entity who unfolds our solar logos within his consciousness. It was Temple Richmond who wrote the book Sirius, who said, the Tibetan has said that the work of Blavatsky and Bailey function respectively as teachings preparatory and intermediate, and that both are intended to precede and condition the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Of great interest is the Tibetan's further claim that a third and revelatory installment of his teaching is due to appear between 1975 and the early part of the 21st century. And we're here right now, 2025. And you recall the writings I was doing in 1975, crossing the pond to work with Dr. Douglas Baker. He is, I think, the third installment. That time is upon us now. A mere 7 years when this was written remain within the period, well, we're here right now, specified by the Tibetan for the third installation of the initiatory wisdom to be released. It is therefore important for all seekers in the Syrian tradition to know of Alice Bailey and the teaching on Sirius given through her by the planetary hierarchy. Such knowledge may very well form the stepping stone to greater comprehension of the third installment of initiatory wisdom when it is soon released. She goes on to talk about the externalization of the hierarchy, and that's really kind of what this is all about. Now, I want to point out in the horoscope of the United States, Douglas Baker progressed the horoscope to 2000. It's my opinion that oftentimes the visions that Dr. Baker got by propositioning the higher self, by taking aspects from the astrology chart of the United States and then putting those in his spiritual diary, like he's taught all of his Clergate students to do, and then focusing on those, and then in the nighttime going into the inner worlds in the dream state, and in his case, going beyond the astral, he had the ability to project into the mental level. And then bringing back the wisdom as he did in that esolepsy state, as I told you about before. But oftentimes, I think the visions are not geared toward a particular date. Sometimes his visions extend into the future. And in one case, I was listed in the dictionary. This was progressed to 2000. It included aspects to Pluto. So I'm not going to read the astrology, but I'll read the visions that he got back. Notice, and this is current, secret irritation with a partner to the north. Could be Canada, possibly over constriction of a communication line like a freeway or common defense areas. He also talked about the gun laws. He talked it previously, just before this, but I wasn't going to add that in. And also the violence in the streets, sometimes actually creating situations of violence to do whatever. Okay, then the second one here is San Francisco threatening tremors, people in the streets. Third one, Professor Scott Olsen teaching comparative religion in Florida, threatened. Question by the churches. What I'm going to talk about in a second, that's probably where there'll be some issues that are going to arise. Problems in healthcare institutions drag out a long time. And I'm saying I think this is the present. Second area, there is now extreme polarization, not just in the US. For example, in your Aryel's distinction between America and the US in the dawn of a new era, Krishnamurti and the wisdom explosion in the American age, but the entire world. To overcome this, should we reintroduce the mysteries, a la Eleusinian mysteries, and the Kukion, the entheogens, that were so successful in organizing the culture and society in Greece for so many centuries until the mysteries were closed down. So you're going to see that I was talking about this all along. Every time I came to Little Elephant, I would spew the same material, including the entheogenic material. Here in South Africa, the monomyth and the road to Eleusis. So in the Eleusinian mysteries, based upon the abduction of Persephone and then Demeter going in search of her, etc., which was the mythology surrounding the Eleusinian mysteries, and in the Telesterion, they would have these incredible visionary experiences, but was forbidden to reveal the content. And remember, Plato came very close to losing his life. The Nocturnal Council paid him a visit because he put out quite a bit in the dialogues. And you see here from these images in the upper right-hand corner, here's the Kernos vessel for the Kukion, the entheogenic substance, and the images here with the grain and the wine Dionysus and the satyr with the psychotropic Eucharist, and here Dionysus and Hermes with the entheogenic grain. This is what was descended to the Christian mysteries. And the original Christian mysteries, they definitely were having transformative experiences because they were not using what we use today, the placebos of the wine and merely the bread. It was bigger than that. And that's what led to their transformations. Oops. So just so we know, this is very clear in the works of The Secret Doctrine and Isis Unveiled. Blavatsky says the following: in India, the initiated received the soma, a sacred drink which helped to liberate the soul from the body. And in the Eleusinian mysteries, it was the sacred drink, the kukion, offered at the epopteia. That's from Isis Unveiled. Furthermore, the third part of the mysteries of the sacred rites was called epopteia, or revelation. Plato was known as an epopt. In fact, his original name was Aristocles, but they called him Platon for the breadth of his vision. There's a tradition, it could have been the breadth of his skull, kind of like a baker with a big skull, but also the breadth of his shoulders. He was a great athlete, as was Buddha, as were many of these initiates. It means the stage of divine clairvoyance, epopteia, implying revelation by no human agent, but through receiving the sacred drink, the soma. So we're raising this issue about, do we need to reintroduce the mysteries, including the psychedelics, the psychotropics, not recreationally, but to transform consciousness? So I'm going to share with you nature's most effective snare as an image. And then what happens when you feed the spider various substances? This is old images, 1960, in fact, from a Science Life book. So this is what happens when people use amphetamines. You see what it does to the spider's web. A Mickey fin, chloral hydrate. It is quite interesting. If you look at the center of the chloral hydrate, you see the hexagon in the center, this internal structure. You're going to be shocked at some of these. Benzodrine. Well, this one probably. Caffeine. The images of pot, by the way, aren't really very good. I don't have it in here, but entheogen. Now, there's no quick way to transformation. Um, so don't think that just by taking one of these substances, you're transformed. It takes a lot of preparation, set and setting, and of course, uh, the 8 limbs of yoga are probably the most standard ways of going about this. Yama and niyama, do this, don't do that, 10 commandments, various ethical considerations you need to develop. And then, of course, the asanas, the pranayama, the dharana, the intense concentration, or pratyahara before that, sensory withdrawal, and then finally dhyana, meditation. Ultimately, what you want is samadhi, and that is the goal at every one of us ultimately. And so we see the difference between a normal web and what the scientists said with the entheogen, actually improving on the natural web, and you can see that in the image. So I just came back from Prague. We're doing a film, and I'll be in the film. It's called The History of the Future. This documentary investigates the increasing prominence of psychedelic substances in contemporary society, tracing their historical trajectories and examining their potential future applications. Emphasis is placed on their therapeutic potential for both physical and psychological healing, as well as their capacity to catalyze profound personal transformation. Through these experiences, individuals may attain deeper levels of self-understanding, emotional well-being, and existential meaning. A central focus is also placed in the film, that's kind of where I entered in, on the Eleusinian mysteries of ancient Greece, whose enduring influence on the formation of Western civilization, especially in the realms of culture, science, art, and philosophy, is critically examined. Here's some of the people that will be starring in the show. Rick Doblin, the founder of MAP, Stanislav Grof, probably one of the greatest researchers, a psychiatrist, Dennis McKenna, brother of Terence McKenna, scientist and researcher, Graham Hancock, author, journalist, and researcher, Rupert Sheldrake, biologist and author, specialist with morphic fields and morphogenesis. Probably the most important one of all is David Nutt. I know the name is funny, spelled N-U-T-T at Imperial College, researcher and professor who works with the UK government. And what they discovered when they asked him, figure out what are the dangers of various types of substances, the psychedelics were on the bottom of the list, not dangerous. Of course, you have to be very careful who's administering them, set and setting, and you really need someone to take you through it with you. But the ones that are really bad, top of the list, alcohol, cocaine, tobacco, that's what's killing everybody. But the psychedelics, psilocybin, bufo alvarius, ayahuasca, are actually being used to cure various addictions. And also, many soldiers are now using these substances to overcome their PDS, is it? I think I got the wrong name. So I'll be in the film, but I also did a testimonial to the film we showed in this place in the United States. I then took it down to the Ohm Theater with Philip Zaruba, and it was called Bufo Alvarius. This is clearly the best presentation of the profound effects of what ultimately may become the greatest entheogen to humanity. And these are the 20 international film awards won by that film. And so we're really, really looking forward ultimately to take a look at this. So the third area, what is of central importance in all of these esoteric efforts is, and Ariel and I agree on this, is initiation, actual personal, societal, and global transpersonal transformation that involves literally, as he points out in The Dawn of a New Era, mutation of the brain. Now, I'm the one who's advocating the entheogens. I'm not saying that Ariel has said that at all. To the contrary. But I do want to point out a couple things. Back in 1999 in Scientific American, it was pointed out that new nerve cells for the adult brain, you can regenerate them. Contrary to the dogma, human brain does produce new nerve cells in adulthood. Now, when Aryel talks about mutation of the brain, I'll just say this, and he'll be the expert in talking about that it's instantaneous. It's top down, not bottom up. So that when one goes through a transformative experience with the mind and the brain, everything is transformed and changed immediately. And then when I was at the University of London, Birkbeck, you can see the date there. I'm just copying right from the book itself, a book by Gopi Krishna that I realized at the time was so important, the biological basis of religion and genius. He was the one who wrote about the Kundalini experience that was so absolutely incredible. Here's some potential areas of discussion. Ariel's going to speak next. But again, Krishnamurti and Bohm, initiatory transformation of consciousness and brain mutation, revival of the Eleusinian mysteries and possibly entheogens. And as I pointed out before, N is within, Theo the divine, and Gen is Genesis. So what happens is from the inside, you're bringing out the divine that's already present in you. The perennials are the Mahatmas, the role of ego death, America versus the United States, that a concept that is brought up in Aryel's book that is very interesting. And of course, I was interested in the prophesied merger of sacred geometry and esoteric astrology. That's probably more for Alan and Charlene in terms of their esoteric astrology work. Okay. Aryel.
The old gray mare ain't what you used to be. I can tell you, I'm in quite a bit of pain as I speak with you. Scott came to see me yesterday, and he said to me that I am now the elder. And I want to ask you all if there is anyone here who is 81 or older. Can I see her?
Hands up.
One? Anyone here? Yeah, so
Dieter, Randy, and Pat Hittleman.
okay.
Anybody else? Oh, we got the three.
And so I'm thinking, you know, I'm 81. I'm certainly an elder in that respect. I don't know about wise, which he also kind of was suggesting. You'll be the judge of that. Scott and I are, I would say, like an odd couple.
Don't give our secrets away. Come on.
There's nothing gay here. I'm not talking about that. But we met at the meeting of the Florida Federation in 2016, and it was love at first sight. Again, nothing gay here. But it was from the beginning, and it has intensified over time, more than brotherly love. It's more than brothers. It's something much deeper involved in that. And I find that really quite astonishing because we have such divergent ways of understanding the one wisdom. I think of C. Gina Rajarasa, who was the fourth international president of the Theosophical Society, and who figured prominently in my own move into understanding a little bit about Theosophy. Gina Rajarasa used to make a distinction between mystics and occultists. And he said what was mostly taught in the Theosophical Society and in the New Age in general was occultism. And a lot of people interested in occultism have a problem with Krishnamurti, K as I call him, or Krishnaji, because K was more of a mystic. And so it's two completely different approaches. And Scott and I are an odd couple to a large extent because of this, that I perceive, we're just talking in generalities here, all right? I see Scott as having more of an occult approach to the perennial wisdom, and I tend to have more of a mystical approach, like Kay. And so that's something for you to take into account. There's a profound difference, but yet there's a unison there that I hope that all of you will, or at least some of you, will be able to see at a deeper level. On the surface, it looks like something incompatible, but there is an incompatibility between the occult approach and the mystical approach. I don't see it that way. And Gina Rajarasa certainly didn't see it that way either. They are appropriate ways of, appropriate though diverging ways of getting at the same wisdom. I want to share with you the fact that Scott was speaking yesterday about near-death experiences. And I know that this has been something important in a lot of what he has been discussing, and those of you who are familiar know this to be true. And my life began really with a near-death experience, almost literally. I was a few months old and was very sick, had uncontrollable coughing, and my parents, and this was in Havana, Cuba, my parents were extremely worried. They took me to the best pediatric clinic in Havana, the Marfan Clinic, which some of you may know or not, but Marfan was a famous French doctor, famous pediatrician, who had a very unique and very progressive approach to his profession. And so it was the best clinic in the country. And Cuba was actually, according to United Nations reports, ahead of the US in terms of healthcare. And so it was top of the line. And yet those fine doctors made a big mistake, a blunder, because they thought I had tuberculosis. And they were treating me for tuberculosis. And I did not have tuberculosis. I had whooping cough, which was common back then, just as much as tuberculosis was, TB. And so one day I was fine, and then plop, I was gone. And I was dead for several minutes. And that's what's known about it in the outside world. Physically, that's what happened. And internally, I had a near-death experience. And that near-death experience, I found myself surrounded by presences and other things happened. That experience and what I got from it has pretty much defined my whole life. That's 81 years. I encountered what is called Theosophy when I was 13. This was 1958, 58. I discovered a book in my father's library called First Principles of Theosophy. The author was the aforementioned General Jadasa. And it's, those of you who are familiar with the book know that it's basically a summary of what Theosophy is supposed to be. So I start reading it, and I'm just a 13-year-old kid, right? I start reading it, and he was talking about reincarnation and karma and life after death and things of that nature that we are all familiar with in what eventually became the New Age movement. And the thing that those first few chapters didn't really, I thought, I know this stuff, reincarnation, karma. At the time, I could remember some of my former incarnations, some details that were relevant to me for some reason. And I have talked to people who have been dead recently and things of that sort. So I found it interesting and intriguing that someone was talking about things that were part of my inner life that I had not talked to anyone about as a boy. But then the last 3 chapters of that book talk about the masters and the path of initiation and the inner government of the world and such matters. And that's what really grasped my attention. I could see everything that the book was saying confirmed so much of my inner life that I had not found anywhere else. And so this was major for me. But the notion of initiation really touched me very deeply. So from reading that book, I came to the understanding, Theosophy is about transformation. Theosophy is about, because initiation is meant to be initiation into what? The beginning of what? The beginning of a brand new life. A life that is different from the one that we are accustomed to in our more humdrum daily lives, right? And so, since then, my life has been pretty much about that, about seeing how it is possible to live in that other dimension. Yeah. When I came, so this was 1958. I was 13 at the time. When I read this book, I immediately began to call myself a theosophist. I didn't know up from down, I didn't know what I was talking about, but that's what I called myself. I didn't know there was such a thing as the Theosophical Society at the time. I discovered the Theosophical Society in 1963 in New York City after my family had come to this country. And when I did, the way it came to me was through a friend of my father's who miraculously appeared in my life. He was working at the United Nations, and somehow I connected with him, so I called him and say, I'm so-and-so, I'm the son of your old friend, blah, 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 and I'm interested in knowing about this theosophy. And he said, well, why don't you come to a meeting this Saturday? I said, meeting? What meeting? He said, the Theosophical Society. What's that? I didn't know. So that's how it happened. So that Saturday, I went to the Theosophical Society, the Spanish branch, 242 East 53rd Street in New York City. I was there so many times. But that first meeting, something unexpected happened for me. I found that the members were speaking in a way that did not jive at all with my understanding of theosophy as a transformative psychological process. They were more into understanding it as an intellectual thing. They had read the books about reincarnation and karma and about which I had read some more, of course, in the interim. But to me, the meaning of all of it was defined in terms of that transformative way of understanding what theosophy is. And so I was not sure. When I left that night, I wasn't sure whether this was for me. And so I basically looked and searched within to see whether it was worth it for me to join this organization or not. For this reason, the very reason that in a way defines Scott and I being an odd couple, very much related to it, right? So this is something I've been exposed to for quite a long time. And that night I didn't sleep. And finally, it was like the crack of dawn when I realized that I really wanted to join the organization, not necessarily for reasons that I've seen over the years, people being interested in joining, but it seemed to me that there would be people, I thought, who also had experiences such as the ones that I had had, or who had this interest in initiation, not as a subject of study, not as something that you read in books, but actually being involved in the process. And also I saw it as a good opportunity for being of service to others, which had always been an important part of my own understanding of theosophy. And so, anything wrong?
No, this is, oh, I'm gonna bail. No, I'm in full agreement with the contrast.
Right. Okay, so I thought it was important for me to share all of this with you so you understand there is this contrast in unison somehow between what could be called conventional theosophy and the more unconventional mystical way of understanding it. And so I'd like to do something. Yes, I would like to have some. Thank you very much. Excuse me. I'd like to go at it in a way that might be more mystical, you might say. I would like to suggest to you that you ask yourself, and in an audience like this, you have asked yourself this, but please follow me here for a moment. What are you? Or who are you? I submit to you that when you look at yourself in the mirror, which all of us do early in the morning, right? We identify with the physical body that we see in front of us, and the persona that goes with that physical body, right? It's the physical body and the persona that goes with that physical body. And regardless of how much we may have read about the bodies of humans and the higher levels and whatever, the fact is that all of us here live our lives pretty much with the assumption I am this physical body and the persona that goes with that physical body. The persona being my personality, my memories, like my memories when I was a baby and when I was a boy and as I grew up, etc. My identifications. I identify with a particular ethnicity. I identify with a particular country that I attach myself to. I identify myself with a religion and so forth. And so that's the persona. The word persona is really fascinating. And again, I'm aware that a lot of you are quite familiar with this, that the word persona comes from the Greek theater specifically. And it simply means a mask. The mask that was used in the Greek plays that we still go and see in theaters or even in the movies sometimes. But the Greeks had this mask, and the mask was the persona, the character that the actor happened to be representing at that for that particular play, whatever it was, whether it was a comedy or a tragedy, a drama, whatever. The word persona simply means sona is sound and per is through. The mask is that which the sound goes through, right? So when we talk about our persona that goes with the physical body, right? We are referring to a mask. All of us are wearing masks right now. Right now, you as you're sitting there, Scott as he's standing here, and me talking with you, sharing some of my perceptions with you. All of these are masks, right? But what is behind the mask? A mask, as in the Greek theater, represents that there's something behind it. What is that which is behind the mask? And it is intriguing to note that all the great religions tell us that there is a deeper side to who we are, as a side that is not the body with the persona. There's something behind that, and that being more in that world, in that inner world, would make us better human beings, far better human beings, create better societies, and create a better world. And so in the past, people used to identify with Christianity or Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism. All of these many religions had their own way of addressing this very issue. All of them. It is an amazing thing. Now, the thing is, even though that is true, the reality is that people who belong to these various religions have always tended to be, and still are today, segregated from those who are not members of the choir, so to say. People who are not members of the particular religion that one identifies with, those are heretics, those are Gentile, they are whatever. We have many words for segregating against others. I submit to you that when the great teachers were here, and by the great teachers, I mean individual human beings who shared with us these deeper truths about ourselves, they were speaking about something that today we might call transpersonal states of awareness, that which happens beyond the personal, transpersonal, the persona again, that which is not part of your body and persona. And so this is what they were addressing. It was a form of psychotherapy, really. That's what religion really is. It's meant to be a form of psychotherapy. However, after the initial great message was given, say by Jesus or the Buddha or Lao Tse, whoever, people who could be said to be bodies with personas took that insight about that rich life that there is underneath the persona and created religion out of it. And those religions have become the enemies of one another. And so religion has become a big, big problem for the human race for this reason, that we have turned our backs on what really matters about religion. And instead, not everybody, if you see a good Christian, you recognize that good Christian as being someone who follows the Sermon on the Mount. Not someone who is not interested in segregating between my little group and your little group or your non-group. So the body with the persona is the one that is interested in institutionalizing that which is not institutionalizable, if I may use that big word. Love cannot be institutionalized. You can talk about it, I'm doing it right now, but talking about love is not love. And justice, fairness, is not something that belongs to the body and its persona. It's outside of that. It's that which is on the other side of the mask, right? And so for centuries, for millennia, actually, we were making those blunders, you might say, of misinterpreting deeply and in a very concerned way what the original presentation had been. The original presentation had been live in transpersonal states of awareness in your daily life. In other words, live your daily life in the context of love, in the context of justice, in the context of truth-seeking, truth-finding. And it was Madame Blavatsky at the end of the 19th century who first pointed out in world history that all of the religions, the statement that I made before is possible thanks to Madame Blavatsky. She was the one who made the world aware of the fact that all the religions are really aiming at exactly the same thing, namely trying to convince us who are bodies with personas, trying to convince bodies with personas that this other way of living, according to the transpersonal, is the intelligent way of living. Blavatsky pointed this out. And so she called it by many names. The one name that stuck most was Theosophy, wisdom, divine wisdom. Theos for God or gods, and Sophia for wisdom. And so in her book, The Key to Theosophy, came out in 1889, she was attempting to provide an introduction to that theosophy that she was talking about. Sometimes she called it the esoteric science, the wisdom religion, Gupta Vidya. She used sometimes names from some of the various groups around the world who have addressed that transpersonal state of being. And so if you look at chapter 1, page 1 of the Key to Theosophy, she says, the book is written in the form of question and answer. And so the presumed inquirer asks the question, what is theosophy? That's the beginning of the Key to Theosophy. She's explaining to us what this is about. She tells us theosophy is wisdom such as that possessed by the gods. That's a quote unquote. wisdom such as that possessed by the gods. That's what she says, word for word. Now, Blavatsky was living in the Victorian age, and Victorians were a very quaint version of humanity. They had, they may look a little cute to us from a distance in some of the things that they did and some of their behaviors, but also there were very concerning aspects to Victorianism, such as they were rabidly imperialistic and supremacist. We are the only ones that count. And so when they considered Asia or Africa or the Americas, those were savages. And we are there to save them. They have this rabidly felt sense of separateness among human beings. And so Blavatsky was surrounded by that crowd. And when they see that she says, Theosophy is wisdom such as that possessed by the gods, they say, that's it. I know what Theosophy is, right? And so let's just accept what the gods have told us in the past, all the various religions and the various teachings, the reincarnation, the karma, the race, and the whole panoply of things that became what Victorians thought Theosophy was. But now, if you go back and you look more carefully, pay attention to what she said. She didn't say, oh, Theosophy is that which you find in many books, and you will be getting deeper into it by discussing with others and all of that. That's not what she said. Theosophy is wisdom such as that possessed by the gods. In order to even know what Theosophy is, you have to be a god. That's another matter. You have to be a god. Wisdom such as that possessed by the gods. In order for you to know it, you have to be a god. What does that mean? That's a whole other matter. Whole other matter. You can't use the bag of tricks that the body and its persona would want to be the judge of what she was talking about, which is what Victorians did. And as I say in all of my works, the Victorian-minded are still very much with us today. So this is not just a historical problem from that quaint period that we call the Victorian era. It's with us today, right? In many of her books, in fact, in all of her works, beginning with Isis Unveiled, which she published in 1877 when she was still living in New York City. She made it very clear that the only people who really understood what Theosophy was throughout the ages, in all the many, in Asia, in the Americas, in Europe, all the ancients who spoke about this Theosophy using various names to describe it, but referring to the same transpersonal reality that we all can see today. So in all of her works, I'm sorry about that gap, but in all of her works, she was constantly referring to the fact that only the initiates knew what the esoteric was about. The others did not know. The others were exoteric. You had to be initiate an initiate in order to be in contact, actually live those transpersonal states of awareness, which is what Theosophy is. And unfortunately, Victorians would not have it. And the subsequent Victorian-minded people who followed the Victorians in their ways of thinking and their ways of behaving, they did not believe really what HPB was saying, but yet they were quoting HPB as if they did. And so it's a problem that is very much alive still today as I perceive it. And so one of the things that Blavatsky, HPB, spoke of is the fact that in the 20th century, that we were in the age of transformation. She said in the esoteric writings that in the 20th century, there would be an avataric manifestation. And that avataric manifestation was said by C.W. Leadbeater and by Annie Besant, who were the main leaders of the Theosophical Society after HPB's passing, and until they died, Besant in 1933 and Leadbeater in 34 the next year. They said that the same teachers who had inspired the foundation of the TS and inspired HPB had told them, and that HPB also had told them about this coming of Maitreya in the 20th century. When, and this is my take on this, when CWL, the Viter, discovered Krishnamurti on Adyar Beach in 1909, shortly after that, you know, he was struck by the aura of the boy. He was basically, Krishnamurti was basically at that time, and I think throughout his life, really, he was autistic. At the time, he looked retarded. Everybody assumed he was retarded, including his family. And in 1929, 20 years after that discovery, Kay parted ways to that world, Victorian-minded way of understanding Theosophy, and he presented the Theosophy that HPB was talking about, actually talking about, not as interpreted by Victorians, but as she was saying, wisdom such as that possessed by the gods, only initiates. So Kay cut to the chase, and he said, truth is a pathless land. There is no path to truth. When you talk about there being a path to truth, that is the body with its persona being very clever and saying, I can't do this now. There is a path. So maybe next incarnation, maybe next year, next week, but not now. You know, it's kind of like St. Augustine's prayer. Please, Lord, let me be the best that I can. Let me be wonderful to everyone at all times. Please, Lord, do that, but not yet. Not yet. So that is what a path is postponing what you know very well you need to do now, not next year, not next incarnation. And so it's now. And so the bodies with theosophical personas that were facing him did not like that at all. You know, I do need a path. I do need someone to tell me. I need the training wheels of some master, some authority to tell me what I need to do. Otherwise, I don't know nothing, right? I'm useless. No, you're not useless. You're responsible. You have to be responsible for your life, and you have to be responsible for your brothers and sisters. And that's what Kay was talking about, taking responsibility. He was basically saying, grow up, abandon all that childish nonsense about you needing masters and you needing a path and you needing a structure of some sort that will tell you what to do. I do go from point A to point B to point C, and then you move on. No, 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 no. You know very well. You know very well what you need to do. You don't need anyone to tell you that. We all do. We know right and wrong. But the the cleverness of the body with the persona, he's a clever guy. He's an analyzer. He analyzes everything and says, is this something that will make it possible for me to continue surviving? Is the survival of the persona that a lot of people are concerned with. And so we don't want that. And this is where the rejection to K came from. He was agreeing with HPV. He was agreeing with what she was saying. And the people who were disagreeing with him were disagreeing because why? They disagreed with HPV also. They never saw that, and they still don't. I'll leave it there because, it's the time anyway. But anyway, thank you very much for your patience with me.
That's fine. That's fine. So, a couple things that you've said are really important. That's where the comparative religion, comparative mythology comes in, where people are able to understand that each religion, for example, has the golden and silver rule, one or the other, but you need both. Do good, don't do bad. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Don't do unto others as you wouldn't have them do unto you. The trouble is the crystallized form of each of these religions, and I think that's what you're getting at.
Yeah.
The crystallized form of Theosophy, the crystallized attitudes make it kind of a separative approach to things.
Yeah.
But deep down in, one can see the real essence, the reality of the beauty of truth, beauty, goodness, selflessness. All of the near-death experiences, when they come back, you realize what the one thing they say from the other side. It's one thing. Love is the key. Love. So another thing I'd comment on is, Aryel, for the first 4 years of your life, like Krishnamurti, they thought you were retarded. And the reason they thought he was retarded is because he was meditating those first 4 years of your life.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
So now with...
Yeah, but the comparison with Case,
No, but, well, I'm not trying to... Okay. But it's important because that was a big factor in your life, the ability to be able
Yes.
to meditate and to do these things. Now, another thing that's common from my studies and from yours with Krishnamurti is what I found in Plato, is thinking outside the box.
Yes.
So sometimes Ariel would call this trans-analytic, going beyond the analysis. We're so busy analyzing everything. For Plato, it was called abduction or retroduction, a form of reasoning in which you look at the anomalies, the puzzles, and then you really kind of shift into the non-dominant right hemisphere, which is literally like a satellite dish. And if you ask the right question, the divine, the source, will answer back. And that's where you get the ahas and the eurekas, and that actually is part of the scientific method that so many people are confused about. It's not just deduction and induction, and that's where Thomas Kuhn comes in, we could talk
Yes,
about.
right.
Where many people are just doing in science, just the normal science, they call it, where they stick the anomalies under the rug, they ignore them. But what I think Kay was talking about, what Plato was doing, is this retroductive abductive process where they focus on the anomalies, and those lead to, they're the puzzles, and then, what must be the case to make these normal? William James called them wild facts.
Yeah.
The pragmatists picked up on this because Peirce, Charles Sanders Peirce, had rediscovered this in Plato. And that's what he was doing, presenting problems to the Academy members, and they were expected to retroduct or abduct outside the box the solution. This is what Albert Einstein did. He took the three anomalies of black body radiation, photoelectric effect, specific heats. Everybody ignored those because classical mechanics, it seemed to work, but they're the things that stimulated the abductive. And for Einstein, again, pump it in the left hemisphere, but visualize, ponder on this, as some of you were saying with Alice Bailey, and then reflect, aha, eureka. If relativity theory is true, black body radiation, photoelectric effect, specific heats, they become the expected. So even though you and I are brothers, kind of a little bit different in terms of the my occult approach and the mystical approach, we definitely agree on this thinking outside the box, getting beyond the Victorian language,
Yes.
which is another thing
Right.
that you've emphasized. But again, we're really on the same path.
Yes,
It's the same
well,
thing.
As I see it, science consists of having no pre-digested assumptions. You have to put all of your assumptions, bracket them off, is what they say in phenomenology. With phenomenology is a major school in psychology as well as in philosophy, that you basically, what you do is that you have to bracket off all of your assumptions. When you're doing research, what you have to do is bracket off. Be aware in order to bracket them off, to see what your conditioning is, to see what your expectations are. And then you bracket those off, and then you can do research. If you don't do that, what you're involved in, you may call it science, but it isn't science. Science can only be if there is a borderless investigation, an investigation that is not tainted by anything that came before, by any preconceptions of any sort.
So we didn't know the direction this would take.
Yeah.
So I gave my little spiel. My good friend gave his spiel. I hope this was worthwhile for you. I think we've come to the closing time.
Yes.
So thank you very much.
Definitely.